What's going on, everybody? It's Simple Logic's back at it with another video. Today I've got another review for you guys. We're going to be looking at the game called Spec Ops: The Line. I know a lot of you have heard about it, but for those of you who haven't played it, I just want to give you my impressions of it, and if it's worth playing in 2017. Without further ado, let's get this thing started. First, I want to talk about the story, because this is Spec Ops: The Line's strongest asset by far. If you've heard anything about this game, I'm sure you've heard about the story, and I'm here to confirm that everything you've heard is absolutely true. If it wasn't for the engaging and thought-provoking story that this game offers, I would find it hard to even recommend this game to anyone. Now, that's not to say the game is bad in any way, because it's not, but it's quite average. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't really see the point in playing an average shooter that's like 4 years old. Thankfully though, Spec Ops: The Line takes the average third-person shooter, turns it into a gripping and memorable ride that has you asking questions long after the credits roll. For those of you who don't know, Spec Ops: The Line is set in Dubai, which in itself is very unique. I've personally never played another game that features Dubai as its setting. Unlike if you were to go visit Dubai though, the game features a Dubai that is taken over by a sandstorm. There's still gorgeous vistas and beautiful architecture, but the city has a dreary, dark, and worn-down atmosphere. You play as Captain Martin Walker, a seemingly generic soldier who sounds suspiciously a lot like Nathan Drake. You and 2 other soldiers are sent into the city to confirm the presence of any survivors. The events that follow are anything but generic. You are soon faced with the horrors of war. This is one of the things that make this game so special. Most games don't show you the true side of war, the horrors and the consequences of your actions. I absolutely love the way the game puts you in situations where there really isn't a clear good or evil choice. This forces you to choose the lesser evil, which sometimes turns out to be the worst decision in the long run. If you are tired of generic stories and shooters, and you're looking for a game that isn't afraid to show the darker side of what happens when the bullets start flying, then I can highly recommend playing through this wonderful, thought-provoking campaign. I do want to talk a little bit about how the game looks, since I'm a sucker for graphics, and I have to say I was pleasantly surprised by this 4-year-old game. Now no, it's not no Gears of War 4 in the graphics department. Character models lack detail and there's some pretty hideous textures here and there, but despite a few flaws, the lighting still holds up. Where it lacks in detail, the environment makes up for it. I absolutely loved the effects used when a sandstorm would roll in. The game does such a good job of making you feel stuck in the middle of a storm. Through the particle effects and animations of the character as he blocks his face from the wind, it was all just very nicely done. Some of my favorite moments in the campaign were the gorgeous views from the top of the many skyscrapers in the game. Those moments really made me want to visit Dubai. Maybe minus the city being overrun by sand though. Another pleasant surprise for me was the multitude of destructible environments throughout the game. Now, not everything could be destroyed, but there was enough smaller objects and even cover that would crumble from gunfire, and some pretty huge set-piece moments of large portions of buildings collapsing that were very, very impressive. I wish that they had utilized this more in the way that you could use the environment to kill your enemies, because when they did that, it was super satisfying. There were a couple of negative points I'd like to talk about, and they're in the controls. Because the game was clearly a console port, it felt very awkward at times. Melee and climb over obstacles were bound to the same key, and I found myself constantly hitting barriers with the butt of my gun. Also, the cover system was passable. Definitely isn't the most innovative cover system. It did work, but not always the way you'd like it to. It felt really clunky at times. Lastly, I want to talk about the value, because if you know me, this is a very important part of any game, especially for an older one. Because the game is over 4 years old, the multiplayer is non-existent. I managed to find one other player to run around with for a match, but that was it. So that part of the title is a write-off. So that just leaves the campaign for content, and it took me right around 6 hours to beat, which in my opinion was the perfect length. And if you go and buy this game today on Steam, it's around $30. Now to me, that's quite steep, and I'd have to say, even though the game was fun, I couldn't justify paying for it. But, and that's a huge but, you can find this game on G2A for right around $3, even less sometimes. Now that's a steal of a deal. And for the price of a coffee, I highly recommend that every one of you go over to G2A right now and pick this game up. It is highly underrated. So to answer the question, is it still good? The answer is a resounding yes. Spec Ops: The Line is an amazing game. Especially if you're like me and you love a game that you sit down to play and the story just doesn't let you stop playing.